This happened earlier this year while I was visiting family in southern France. I travel there fairly often, but instead of staying with relatives, I usually book a hotel or Airbnb nearby. I prefer having my own space. For this trip, I found a cheap Airbnb within walking distance of my family's house. The listing looked normal, a small private apartment with access to a garden. The reviews were mostly positive. Nothing stood out as suspicious. The first problem happened before I even got inside. The host was supposed to meet me with the keys, but when I arrived, nobody was there. I waited outside for over an hour. Eventually, he showed up and apologized repeatedly. He explained that he'd been visiting friends in another town. Then he casually admitted he'd been drinking. According to him, he'd rushed back on his motorcycle while still tipsy because he didn't want to keep me waiting. Then he laughed and asked me not to mention that in my review. I remember thinking it was an odd thing to joke about, but I was tired and just wanted to get settled. The host seemed friendly enough otherwise. As he showed me around the property, I realized the Airbnb wasn't quite what I'd expected. The apartment I was renting was attached directly to the house where he lived. That wasn't mentioned clearly in the listing. Still, I figured it wasn't a huge deal. In some ways, it even made me feel safer. I was a woman traveling alone, and knowing someone was nearby seemed reassuring. That feeling didn't last long. The apartment sat slightly below ground level. To enter it, I had to walk down a set of stairs through the backyard. Inside was a bedroom, bathroom, and small kitchen. Everything looked old, but functional. Then the host pointed out a door beside the bedroom. It connected directly to his part of the house. He told me not to worry. The door stayed locked. According to him, it was never used. At the time, I accepted that explanation. After giving me his personal phone number and suggesting we communicate through WhatsApp instead of Airbnb, he finally left. A few hours later, I returned from visiting family. It was late. I changed clothes and sat down on the bed for a while before taking a shower. That's when I heard someone call my name. A second later, I heard keys turning in a lock. Before I could even react, the connecting door opened. The host walked into the apartment. For a moment, I was completely frozen. He started talking immediately. Apparently, he couldn't find his phone and wanted to check whether he'd left it downstairs. The problem was that he hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He hadn't waited for an answer. He had simply unlocked the door and entered. I was alone. It was late at night, and he had access to the apartment whenever he wanted. I told him I hadn't seen his phone. He looked around anyway, then he apologized and left. The entire interaction only lasted a minute or two, but it completely changed the way I viewed the place. The moment he left, I started wondering what would have happened if I'd already been in the shower, or asleep, or changing clothes. I suddenly didn't feel like I was renting a private apartment anymore. I felt like I was staying in someone else's house. And they had a key. I checked online for hotels. Most were either full or no longer accepting bookings that late. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Then I noticed something in the bedroom. There were 2 wooden chairs near the wall. One of them had rope tied tightly around both armrests. Not loose rope. Not something being stored temporarily. It looked deliberate. To this day, I have no idea why it was there. Maybe there was a completely innocent explanation. But after everything that had already happened, it was enough. I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about worst-case scenarios. I tried pushing the chairs against the bedroom door like people do in movies. It didn't work. The door opened inward. Anyone could have pushed it open without much effort. That's when I made my decision. Around midnight, I called my brother. He drove over and picked me up. I spent the rest of my trip staying with family instead. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the host was simply careless and overly friendly. Maybe the rope on the chair meant absolutely nothing. But I'd rather be embarrassed for overreacting than become the subject of a true crime documentary. This happened while I was still living with my parents. Our house has 2 floors, and on the first floor there's a small in-law apartment where I stay. The rest of the first floor includes a garage, laundry room, and furnace room. At the time, my dad was having several wall-mounted air conditioners replaced. For days, contractors had been coming in and out of the house. The day this happened, my mom and I spent the afternoon grocery shopping while my dad stayed home to supervise the work. When we got back, the contractors were gone and my dad had already gone upstairs to bed. My mom and I made dinner and sat upstairs watching TV for a while. At some point, I mentioned that our cars were still sitting outside. Earlier that week, a woman down the road had reported someone breaking into both her house and her car. The conversation made my mom nervous enough that she asked me to go downstairs and make sure the front door was locked. When I checked it, I immediately noticed something strange. The door wasn't locked. It wasn't even closed. It was slightly open. That instantly put me on edge. I shut it, locked the deadbolt, and went back upstairs. For the next few minutes, everything seemed normal. Then I heard a loud thump from downstairs. I barely reacted. I assumed it was my cat. She always got excited around feeding time. A minute later, I heard another thump. This one was louder. I laughed and told my mom that the cat was probably demanding dinner. I headed downstairs. The second I opened the door to my apartment, something felt wrong. Usually my cat would come running the moment she heard me. This time she was nowhere in sight. I called her name. Nothing. I walked toward the kitchen and that's when I noticed it. The furnace room door was closed. That might not sound strange, but nobody ever closed that door. Not me. Not my parents. We intentionally left it open so the cat could get inside and catch mice. The moment I saw it, a horrible thought crossed my mind. The sound I'd heard earlier wasn't my cat. It could have been that heavy furnace door closing. I stopped walking. Every instinct in my body told me that someone was standing behind that door, listening, waiting. I didn't know if I was being paranoid, but I didn't want to find out. Instead of investigating, I pretended everything was normal. I started talking to my cat in a cheerful voice. I scooped food into her bowl. I walked around casually. The entire time I kept the furnace room door in my peripheral vision. I didn't want whoever might be behind it to know that I suspected anything. After a few minutes, I calmly walked back upstairs. The second I got there, I told my mom everything. She wasn't convinced. She thought one of the contractors might have closed the door before leaving, but she could see how shaken I was. Eventually, she agreed to wake up my dad. My dad listened quietly. Then he grabbed his handgun and headed downstairs. A few seconds later, we heard him yell, "Call the police, now!" I've never heard that tone in his voice before. My mom and I locked ourselves in a bedroom and called 911. Within minutes, officers arrived and searched the entire property, room by room, closet by closet. They didn't find anyone. Eventually, the police left. Later, my dad explained why he'd immediately told us to call for help. When he went downstairs, the furnace room door was open. So was the back door leading outside. Wide open. Someone had almost certainly been hiding in that furnace room. And after hearing us upstairs, they waited for the opportunity to slip out the back. To this day, I don't know how long they were inside the house. I don't know whether they entered through the front door when it was left unlocked. And I don't know if they were already hiding there while my entire family sat upstairs watching TV. What I do know is that if I hadn't noticed that furnace room door, I might have walked right up to it. A few months ago, I had the scariest experience of my life. For context, I was a teenager who had a bad habit of sneaking out at night. My parents were strict about curfews, so whenever school or life got stressful, I'd wait until everyone was asleep, climb over the backyard fence, and spend a couple of hours walking around town. I'd been doing it for nearly a year without any problems. The night this happened started like any other. Around 2 a.m., I slipped out of the house wearing a sweatshirt and headed toward a shopping plaza a few miles away. I spent some time wandering around before sitting on a bench. Out of boredom, I picked up a plastic spoon I found on the ground and started scraping it against the pavement until part of it wore down. Eventually, I left the plaza and headed toward a park near my neighborhood. It was one of my favorite places to end these walks. At night, though, the park could feel unsettling. A ring of trees surrounded it, and once the sun went down, the place became completely deserted. I remember lying on one of the picnic tables staring up at the sky when I suddenly heard someone whistle. I sat up immediately. Standing near the entrance was an older man. I recognized him instantly. He was a tall, skinny guy who wandered around town every day. I had seen him dozens of times before. He always wore the same button-up shirt and cargo pants. The only conversation I'd ever had with him happened about a year earlier. As I walked past him one afternoon, he looked at me and said, "Jesus loves you." Then he smiled. It wasn't threatening, just strange. Back at the park, he stood under a streetlight staring directly at me. Neither of us moved. For what felt like forever, we just stood there looking at each other. Then he started walking toward me, slowly. At that point, every instinct was telling me to leave. But for some reason, I couldn't move. I was completely frozen. The closer he got, the more uncomfortable I felt. When he finally reached me, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that makes you feel like somebody knows something you don't. Without saying a word, he reached out and touched my shoulder. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a plastic spoon. My stomach dropped. It was the same spoon I had left behind at the shopping plaza over an hour earlier. He tucked it into the pocket of my sweatshirt. That's when my brain finally snapped out of whatever frozen state I was in. I turned and ran. The nearest place I could think of was the public restroom near the edge of the park. I rushed inside, locked the door, and stayed there. For a while, I just sat on the floor trying to process what had happened. Eventually, I looked closer at the spoon. Something had been carved into it. At least, I think it had. The markings looked like letters, but I couldn't read them. It reminded me of those AI-generated images where everything looks familiar, but nothing actually makes sense. The longer I stared at it, the less recognizable it became. I had left a normal plastic spoon behind. Now it looked like something else entirely. I must have stayed in that bathroom for nearly an hour. I didn't have my phone because my parents tracked my location. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't check the time. All I could do was wait. Eventually, I convinced myself the man had probably left. I unlocked the door and stepped outside. The park was silent. For a moment, I felt relieved. Then I looked toward a nearby bench. There was someone sitting there, watching the bathroom. Even from a distance, I knew it was him. The realization hit me immediately. He hadn't left. He had waited outside that entire time. I didn't stick around long enough to find out why. I sprinted out of the park and didn't stop until I reached my neighborhood. Even then, I hid behind a bush for several minutes trying to catch my breath before sneaking back into my house. That was months ago. I haven't gone on a late-night walk since. I still have the spoon somewhere in my room. Every once in a while, I think about digging it out and looking at it again. But then I remember the old man sitting outside that bathroom, waiting. And I decide I'd rather not know what was carved into it. To this day, I still wonder how long he had been following me, and whether that night was really the first time he noticed me.